Emmanuel Macron on his first state visit to China since COVID. He came accompanied, but whereas Macron was greeted at the airport's VIP lounge by the foreign minister, a close friend of Xi Jinping, when European Commission President Ursula Von der Leyen arrived, she got the ecology minister at the regular passenger exit, as reported there by Politico. Laurent Thomé.
Yeah.
What's wrong with the ecology minister?
It's the Chinese government is very much into protocol. Macron is a head of state, so he will get the red carpet. But from those images, yes, it doesn't look great. But von der Leyen came in, before this trip, she and Macron had prepared for it together, and clearly they had this good cop, bad cop strategy where she was.
Did it work?
Well, did it work? If they were looking for an immediate response from China on the war in Ukraine, no. Xi Jinping was never going to say immediately, "Oh, sure, yes, I will get on the phone with Putin right now."
And of course, diplomacy maybe happens. In fairness, diplomacy perhaps happens best in the dark. It's what you say behind closed doors that matters.
Diplomacy in China only happens with the big dog, the top dog. If you're not talking to the top dog, you're not getting nothing in China. And Macron and his gang go in there dressed up like they've been costumed by the set director from Reservoir Dogs. Look how cool we are, but we're not going to get slaughtered. We're going to come back. We're going to fix this. What happens? They just treat him like a 3-day-old dumpling.
Well, I'm not so sure about that.
I am.
She certainly prefers tea for two, Dateline Guangzhou, and an informal tete-a-tete that happened this Friday between the Chinese and French presidents at the Guangdong governor's residence. Southern China, place it matters, Stacey Mitri, because a lot of business is done in that part with the West, in that part of the country. And, as is the case with these state visits, they announce all these deals and they come with all these business leaders in tow.
Exactly. And I believe Macron had a fairly large entourage of French CEOs moving with him, including the CEO of Airbus, who I believe is working on a new order from various Chinese airlines. They're also talking about opening a new factory in Tianjin, I think. So it sort of calls into question, how far, whether the EU is really serious about, decoupling with China. Obviously, that's been the line from Washington, trying to push the Europeans to take a more confrontational stance.
Well, just if I may, Stacey, at this point, the viewer's confused. On the one hand, we're talking about whether the West is supposed to read China the Riot Act over Ukraine, over trade. And on the other, you're coming with business leaders who are there to ink deals.
Yes, and that's why I also think it's interesting that Macron decided to bring von der Leyen with him. I mean, he's clearly connecting the question of Ukraine to Europe's trade relations with China. I mean, she doesn't tag along unless trade relations sort of hang in the balance, one would think. Of course, when you actually show up and meet with Chinese leadership, perhaps that's more of a sobering moment.
Mila Jacinto.
Honestly, I felt like I was in a time warp watching this. I have seen French presidential visits to China. It's the same pageantry. They travel with 30, 40, 50 French businessmen. They ink a deal, except that this is not 2015 and this is not 2009. I mean, Macron got instrumentalized by China, period. China wants Europe to decouple with the US. China wants to decouple politics from economics. China wants to talk about trade and economics. China conducts economics in a very ideological way, but they simply want their trade partners to function like this. It's a free trade ride.
But there's been this wake-up call, Lila. We saw it with COVID, the fact that the Europe's leaders talked about being over-dependent on China. This talk last week about not decoupling,
De-risking.
but de-risking was
Oh
the
my
was the buzzword that came out of the high halls of power in Brussels.
But precisely, right? Precisely. We're talking about, we saw this dependence in 2020. It's 2023 and we seem to have forgotten that. So when are we going to
you
have
sure
this
to-
moment? Look, this was the same argument that Angela Merkel kept talking about through the Nord Stream. Was like, oh, it's the economy. We've got to look out for our economics. And then, hello, we are way too dependent. So it's precisely the point.
Laurent Thomé, is Europe unaware, or are they? I mean, how are they? This concept, for instance, of de-risking, is that just a nice way of trying to play both sides? What does it mean?
Maybe it's sort of a diet decoupling, I guess.
Decoupling, de-risking,
no,
what is this? Are we in a garage? Take care of the carburetor.
Von der Leyen told our reporters in an interview last month that de-risking means trying to diversify away from China, but it doesn't mean the end of economic relations with China.
You cannot de-risk. You cannot decouple. China has 23% of the world's population, ladies and gentlemen. They're a player whether you like it or not. If there's another serious banking failure, mortgage meltdown, the West is not going to be
But
able
we've
to
seen
deal
the
with it without
conversation
China's help.
change, Craig. We've seen the conversation change out of Beijing, where at when he was elected for his third term,
Yeah.
Xi Jinping talked security instead of economics.
Elected, you mean appointed
Well, he was elected by
by the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah, let's use our terminology.
Okay.
Words are important here.
At the same time, we're seeing expatriates who left China. They don't want to go back anymore.
Right. Well, that's fine. They don't have to go back.
They don't have to go back.
They
Laurent
don't
Thomé?
have to go back. But look at the quality of people we're sending over. I hate the expression, I'm old enough to remember. God, but I'm old enough to remember when Nixon went to China. I'm old enough to remember when Carter went to China. Hell, I covered it as a young reporter.
Okay, I'm old enough to remember when de Gaulle went to China. I mean,
No, but they actually did substantive things there. They had substantive, wise leaders.
Laurent Thomé.
I don't see that
I
here.
think it's much harder to convince some people now to go work, foreigners to go work in China after what happened with COVID.
So is that China's problem or is that Europe's problem then?
It's more of both really. If Europe still wants to do business with China, they need to send European people there to do the work, and China wants to continue business with Europe. They need to be able to greet Europeans. But I think what COVID showed is that China can very quickly, in the snap of a finger, activate its authoritarian system to close down a whole province, city, neighborhoods.
But isn't that why, and this is, again, answering Leela's point here, isn't that why Europe this time may be serious about not putting all its eggs in one basket?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I mean, I think they, and Russia also showed them that I mean, they've said, Europe has said it, von der Leyen has said it, they want to do more business with like-minded countries. Russia showed that if you're too connected economically with a country like Russia, then you're going to run into problems. So they were trying to do the same with China on raw materials, hoping to find lithium in Europe, develop that, but that will take years to happen. Europe will still need lithium from China to develop its green technology, especially if it wants to meet its climate targets.